The race to Super Bowl 58 is heating up. On one conference, you have teams that at least with 10 wins, and on the other conference, you have teams with no more than 12 wins. There's been a lot of speculation what the Super Bowl matchup will be. Will we get a rematch of Super Bowl 47 between the Ravens and Niners? Will we get a rematch of Super Bowl 57 between the Eagles and Chiefs? Will we get a Super Bowl rematch of Super Bowl 27? Or will we get something new? That is what I aim to figure out in this video. I'm going to tell you guys what I think is going to happen in the playoffs. And by sitting down and doing a little bit of research and just kind of thinking about it, I feel like I got a really good pulse on what's going to happen in this playoff season. And the answer may surprise you. With that out of the way, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into my playoff predictions. First and foremost, this is the current bracket we have right now. The Ravens and the Niners are both the 1 seeds, and you can kind of see how the rest of the seeding breaks out on the left and right side. Let's start with the first and obvious matchup, the Buffalo Bills and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Buffalo's going to win this one. Buffalo's just going to absolutely destroy Pittsburgh. They got no TJ Watt and no offense between Rudolph and Pickett. It's been a quarterback carousel, and I don't expect things to change for Pittsburgh. It's been a great run. It's nice to see them get to the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to win this one. So this is one I feel like Buffalo is going to win. Now let's talk about this Dallas-Green Bay game. Now usually when it comes to these 2-7 matchups, 7 seed has not had any luck since it was created. And on paper, you should just take the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're Jordan Love's first year as a starter. They're an incredibly young team. Joe Barry is going to have to find a way to stop a Dallas offense that rolls opponents at home. Furthermore, I mean, the Cowboys are undefeated at home. Why wouldn't you just take the Cowboys? Here's the problem. Here's a really, really important thing to keep in mind. First and foremost, upsets happen all the time. This has all the makings of that. First off, Matt LaFleur is 2-0 against Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm just not sure I trust Mike McCarthy in this playoff situation. The more I thought about it, the more that this game really started to remind me of what happened 2 years ago between the Cowboys and the Niners. For those of you who may not remember, leading up to the Super Bowl 56, the Cowboys rolled in with a 12-5 record, and they faced a San Francisco 49ers team that had just barely made the playoffs. And that was the whole game, where there was that really odd decision by McCarthy to run a quarterback draw with 13 seconds left the game. They couldn't spike the ball. A lot of weird stuff happens when Mike McCarthy coaches games. You saw him almost flub the game to Detroit because of his clock management. And the one thing watching the Packers-McCarthy games is that McCarthy just kind of lets the emotion get the better of him. Like they should have beaten the Packers last year, but they found a way to lose that one. Partly because McCarthy's just not a great coach in crunch time. It is what it is. And another thing too, I heard a lot of talk about what teams are hot and not hot, and the Green Bay Packers would be a team that I would not want to face. This call with Brad Allen in that Detroit Lions Dallas Cowboys game may have changed the entire face of the playoffs. The Packers are the one team that, if I were a playoff team, I wouldn't want to face, mainly because they're young and they have nothing to lose. It's the same reason why last year people should have been really scared of the Detroit Lions if they snuck in there, because they were running hot. Jordan Love's been on a really hot streak as of late, and that Dallas defense can get got at home. The Seahawks did it. I mean, and arguably worked out for the Lions because they may get an easier round one matchup instead of playing a divisional opponent for a third time in a single year. So I'm calling an upset here. I think this is the first time we see a 7 seed win a playoff game. I think that's the Green Bay Packers against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, let's talk about the 3-6 matchup, because there's a 3-6 upset that is going to surprise a ton of people. And no, it is not the Lions and Rams. I've heard so much talk about how the Rams are the team that no one wants to face. Stafford's just gonna go beat up on Goff the moment the Lions have any sort of franchise momentum. Sean McVay is going to make Dan Campbell look like a doofus, and they get to laugh at the Lions fans and talk about how they got fleeced in that trade and that there was a true winner. And I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't. Look at the opponents that the Rams have beaten in this so-called winning streak. This, the 7 out of 8, as they call it. They beat a Seattle team who didn't make the playoffs, an Arizona team who's tanking, Washington, who has the second overall pick, New Orleans, who's not in the playoffs. They barely beat New York only because New York missed the field goal. San Francisco team that lost all their starters. The two games that arguably the Rams were the best in were that Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens game. But the Cleveland Browns game, that was Joe Flacco's first start for Cleveland. And you know what? They lost that Baltimore game. You don't get credit for hanging close against the only good team that you've played down this winning streak. So this is an absolute media creation. This notion that LA is still going to rumble on and make a deep playoff run. I don't see it. When LA has played some tough teams earlier in the season, they got clowned. They got clowned hard. So I think the Rams are an overvalued product. They got a lot of aging stars. And I know they got a few good young guys like Puka Nacua, but Sam Laporta being out is a big problem for Detroit, potentially, but, he may be back. I still like Detroit in this situation against the Rams. Now, the actual 3-6 upset that I'm thinking, Kansas City and the Miami Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are going to win. And I know what you're saying. It's the Dolphins, man. They can't beat teams with winning records. But Kansas City has their own problems, too. First off, Travis Kelce's getting older. Kadarius Toney can't catch a ball. And the last time these two played on a neutral site in Germany, it was really, really close. And Tyreek Hill is going to be back in Arrowhead after a lot of drama, after his house burned down. It's gonna be, and after the Dolphins just got humiliated against the Buffalo Bills to lose out on the division. And let's talk about that last part. Arrowhead. For a while, I've heard about how big of an advantage is for the Kansas City Chiefs to be playing at home. And for the most part, the last few years, that has been true. But has that been the case this year? Well, here are all their home games this year. Against the Lions, Bears, Denver, Chargers, Eagles, Bills, Raiders, and Cincinnati. Take a look. Because they are 4-4 overall, they're 1-3 against teams with winning records, and 0-3 against playoff teams at home. This is not the same Kansas City Chiefs team as years pass. It's just not. So I actually think that this is an environment conducive for the Dolphins to actually win one. And remember, it's not like Miami can't beat teams with winning records. They beat Dallas, which I know Dallas on the road isn't quite the same, but neither is Kansas City. We got to put past this notion that just because Patrick Mahomes has been a great player is going to be a future Hall of Famer, that means the team is always going to be great. That's not the case. I mean, Tom Brady had a stretch like 10 years where he wasn't winning any Super Bowls. So it's not crazy to say that maybe this year they don't exactly go very far at all. So I stand by that. Next on the list, let's talk about these 4-5 matchups. First and foremost, the Browns are going to take care of business against the Texans most likely. This feels a lot like 2020 for the Cleveland Browns. Kevin Stefanski, Coach of the Year. You have an 11-win season going into the playoffs. There's a wild card round. Yeah, this feels a lot like 2020 in many ways for Cleveland. And here's the thing for Houston. CJ Stroud has been really, really good, but the problem is Joe Flacco already cooked this defense, and I expect him to probably do that again. The problem with Houston is that they're way too early. They just don't have a deep enough roster to be able to compete with Cleveland's. So I expect this to be a game where CJ Stroud still puts up great numbers, but that the Texans just fall short. And on the other side, I feel like Tampa Bay actually has a really good shot in this game against the Eagles. Last time they played when the Eagles were kind of still high up, so to speak, they thumped Tampa Bay, but I don't think that this is the same teams earlier in the season. I mean, the Eagles have been completely floundering. They literally just got blown out by the New York Giants. The New York Giants! That's crazy! That's crazy, and yet we're supposed to take him seriously? Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback, and this Eagles defense can get got. And I have a funny feeling that Tampa Bay is going to surprise a lot of people. All right, so finally, we have our Elite Eight. And this would be a little bit of a disappointing matchup for the NFL. The only one that would be interesting in their eyes would probably be Niners-Packers. Then everything else would be kind of a little bit of a hodgepodge. But let's start with first and foremost. No, the 1 seeds are not on losing. They're both going to host the AFC Championship. This game wasn't even close. I don't expect a whole lot to change. Maybe it gets a little closer, but this is Baltimore's game to lose. And on the other side with San Francisco, look, I just don't trust. I don't trust the Packers to win multiple games just because they're so young. You saw this against the Bears. There were a lot of little moments where the Packers just showed their youth and inexperience, where they couldn't get out of bounds, they couldn't get their clock management quite down, and just on the players, they're such a young roster. I think Green Bay is the most dangerous team in round 1, but I think then they're going to give the Niners some fits potentially, because it's still a good young roster, especially on that defensive side of the ball. In theory, I mean, you have Joe Barry, so I don't know about that. So I still think that Green Bay is not quite there yet. They're going to need to do some. They're going to need to get a little bit more experience before they're going to be able to win that elusive second playoff game. Now, this Browns and Buffalo Bills game would be incredibly interesting, and I've loved the Flaccasance, especially being from Ohio, and having it's nice to see that Browns fans are so hopeful and they're rallying around this guy who has literally kicked their butt for years. Here's the problem, guys. And I don't think it's going to happen in round 1, but I think you may start to see it in round 2. Dobbs, Mullins, Walker, Browning, Gardner Minshew. Backups are probably backups for a reason. And it's hard to be a starter in the league. And the truth is that the more film you get, you're going to find something. And I don't know what that would be for Flacco. But there's a reason the Baltimore Ravens got rid of him in the end. There's a reason why he flamed out with the New York Jets. There's a reason that he until very recently, was out of the league. I would love to see the Browns hold up a Super Bowl trophy. But I don't think Flacco's going to be the guy to get it there. And it's a real shame because of how well this defense has been playing. So the Buffalo's probably going to win this one. And on the other side, Lions, Tampa Bay, we saw what happened here last time. I don't expect that to change. I think that's another one where the Lions just could take care of business. So now we have an epic AFC Championship game. Now this matchup would be awesome. It would be awesome to see. You got on one side who's the guy who's probably going to be the MVP of the league versus, in some people's eyes, an MVP candidate. I don't know. But here's the thing with the Ravens that you got to keep an eye on. Because there's exactly one way that the Ravens lose. They either just win or they just choke every lead. That's the only way they lose. It's the only way they lose. And by the way, we saw this exact same game 2 years ago between the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, where the Buffalo Bills rallied from being down 17 points to beat the Ravens, in Baltimore. Which I know this is not going to be the same game, but this could serve as a little bit of a preview. Baltimore has an issue winning playoff games, and I don't think that's going to quite go away yet. I know they're going to get to the AFC Championship, but Buffalo's played a lot of these playoff games before, and they've won a lot of playoff games, even if they haven't gotten to the big one yet. So I actually think Buffalo is going to get to the Super Bowl. And on the other side, San Francisco and the Detroit Lions would be another interesting matchup. A lot more interesting than people thought. I was on this at the start of the season, but The Lions have a habit of playing a lot of teams tough. First and foremost, obviously, we know all about their primetime games. They're 6-2 outside of that 1 o'clock window. But the last time that the Lions played the Niners, it was really close. And this was the year the Lions went 3-13-1, and they nearly pulled off an amazing comeback to tie the game, and then go into overtime, and then see what happens. Jared Goff has played this defense before as a Los Angeles Ram. But B, I mean, we got to be honest with ourselves. Like, San Francisco has had a ceiling the last few years of a team that cannot get past the NFC Championship game. We saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo. We saw it with Brock Purdy. Now, admittedly, Brock Purdy is just because he was injured, but were you really going to trust him to beat the Eagles that year on that day anyways? So, no, I actually think the Lions are going to surprise a lot of people and win this game. They're another team, like, at this point would have nothing to lose. They're a little bit older than they were last year, and I feel like they're just built for the moment. So now we would have a Super Bowl 58 match between the Buffalo Bills and Detroit Lions. And I already know what you're saying. Oh, what about the color scheme? This means that the Baltimore Ravens and San Francisco 49ers are going to play, and therefore Baltimore Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl. Rarely are things that simple. The truth is that things are hard to predict because their upsets are everywhere. Just because your team has the best regular season record does not mean you're going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. If so, Aaron Rodgers would have another 4 Super Bowls, but he doesn't, because this stuff happens. So this is actually a matchup that I predicted back in August, because usually when it comes down to your Super Bowl matchup, there is a team that has been on the periphery that finally breaks through, and then there's kind of a surprise team that gets to the Super Bowl. Yeah, I know. Think about it. Last year, the Eagles kind of came out of nowhere, while the Chiefs have been in contention in the AFC for years. Before that, Tampa Bay kind of came out of nowhere, but the Chiefs were already kind of in that periphery. They won the Super Bowl the previous year, and then 2 years ago, they lost to Brady in the AFC Championship game. You can kind of go down the list here, like the Patriots and Rams. The Rams kind of came out of nowhere to get that thing, while the Patriots have been there forever. That's the basic formula for these matchups. And I'm going to stand by my original prediction at the start of the year that this will be a Buffalo Bills-Detroit Lions Super Bowl. And if I'm right, then I think it's going to end the same way. Because when the Lions were a struggling team, they managed to give the eventual 2 seed of the AFC absolute fits on Thanksgiving. But if they were to play again, I'd take the Lions. Crazy to say. And again, I don't think any of this would be possible without becoming the 3 seed. I really think that the Packers are a scary team, and I would not be surprised again if they beat the Dallas Cowboys. But who knows? Predictions are hard. There are a lot of other people who do these too. They get it awfully wrong. So, hey, we'll see how it works out. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching State of the North.